Hello, I'm Christian Villaverde, and I'm making a refutation of Jennifer Contreras' topic about how that the increase of population will have negative effects on California. And I believe that it does the exact opposite. I believe that the increase of population in California will have significant positive effects in California. For instance, she brings up that the increase of population in California will negatively impact land use, but it does the exact opposite. For instance, several scholars of the modern era have pointed out that the economic benefits of population growth. In the last 3 decades of the 20th century, the Harvard Initiative for Global Health reported that per capita incomes grew by 2/3 with the doubling of the world's overall population. And meanwhile, there are many economists that argue that population growth leads to more property tax dollars, school funding, revenue for local businesses, and federal grants flowing to local co-offers. As well as the growing population, again, it could create more economic growth because the birth of more people equates to a greater number of parents investing into their youth, meaning increased purchases in products such as food, clothing, education-related expenses, sporting goods, and toys that help feed the economy. So the production of more buildings and more stores helps out California economically. As well, according to a press release on November 19th, 2012, from the California State Building Construction's Trade Council, the passage over 100 badly needed revenue increases is simply spectacular for the California construction industry. 85 school bond measures and 15 school parcel taxes were passed. There were 106 school bonds that were on the local ballots that totaled over 14 billion, and 85 of them passed. Those that passed will account for $12.5 billion and will be available for the next years for construction, modernization, and repair of school buildings in California, with the highlight being $2.8 billion bond in San Diego. This land development will positively affect California economically because of all the money being spent. As well, she states that the increase of population will lead to food shortages. Well, I believe that it won't. Population growth opponents often have decried the burden on resources. However, Danish economist Esther Bosserup has argued that growing populations pressure society to be more innovative in order to better serve the whole community. For instance, in California, high-yield crops were developed to increase food production, largely in response to the growing problem of the growing population. As well, more people means just more workers, which also means more energy output, which also means more production of food. And as well as to her other point of the increase of population will lead to a decrease in water. That is true to some extent because water and many of our resources are scarcity. So more people, but with more people, that means more people can generate ideas and improve the productivity of drinkable water. For instance, there has been a new breed of extraordinary low-cost purifiers hitting the market, such as the product called the Life Straw, which is from Vastergaard Fredriksen. The Life Straw is a large straw-like device that is outfitted with a series of water filters. Users can use the straw to drink from it directly from any water source, instantly making it potable or able to drink. As well, to her last point that she makes, the increase of population will lead to more trash. As well, I believe that it won't lead to more trash because more people will have to share resources because there is a scarcity of resources, of course. So That is why there's the reason for the push of going green and using renewable energy, so that will reduce like the pollution in the air and in the world, of course, as well as when technology advances, resources like oil and coal will be seen as inefficient way to gain energy, so the environment will benefit from it as well. And while the agriculture resources are very real concern as the world's population grows, the world's increase in population is responsible for the greater consciousness of the need for additional resources as well as the innovations to produce food at the pace of population growth. Meaning that with the growth of the population, we will be more responsible, and we will take in account for all the trash that we use or we take out. But overall, I'd just like to conclude that the increase of population will not have significant effects just because of the fact that of technological advances and many reforms throughout our government.
All right, structurally it's easy to follow the basic issues that you're presenting. On each of those points, though, there's very little discussion of the advocate's evidence and the way they've reasoned. Almost all of your points basically develop a counterclaim, and I think you've got a pretty good counterclaim on most of those points. On the first one, you do a good job talking about how per capita incomes increased when populations increased. You have an explanation of how economic growth could be advanced by having increased population. And there's a little bit of data on that. And I thought you had a pretty good piece of information that talked about how when they passed these additional bond issues, and I assume that part of that's passed in response to larger populations. I think that that's an inference that needs to be developed a little bit more, that it creates this economic activity. I do think you go a little overboard in developing that particular point. One of the things that we don't have is any contrast to what the advocate's evidence on this particular point was. What proof did they use, and how am I supposed to assess those two things? So I think that that's problematic. On the second argument, I think you've got this good general response that says that this, as populations increase, it puts pressure on us to find a variety of responses. And you've got this, like I said, a good generic quote here. But I couldn't tell. It sounded like a lot of the information that you're presenting on this point is actually from the person that you're quoting, but it was not easy to tell what was quoted material, what inferences you're making, and I think that the separation between evidence and reasoning and your claims really gets bogged down here, and it needs to be a lot more distinct in how you cite the evidence. And then the same thing kind of goes on with the water issue. I think you've got an interesting example with the life straw, but there's a good example of how technology can address many of those issues. And I think that might be a separate argument that just says technology addresses those kinds of issues. On the last point on trash, basically it comes down to repeating the same concept above, that it's going to force us to be more careful, and then you kind of accept the premise that we have to treat items as if they are scarce, and that'll increase their value, or it'll force us to become more effective in using other things. I think that the last point is the one that's most generic, least effective in responding to the advocate's issue, and could also use the most comparison for us. All right, thank you.